Friend, if you have been snapping the suckers off your tomato plants, I have got some hard news for you. You are pruning them wrong. And that one little habit, the one nearly every garden book and website on earth tells you to do, is quietly destroying your harvest before a single tomato ever turns red. I want you to hear me plain today, because this is the #1 tomato myth I see, year after year, and almost nobody sits down and breaks it apart honestly. They just hand you the rule and tell you to follow it, so stay with me a while. By the end of this, you are going to walk out to your tomato patch with brand new eyes, and you are never going to look at a sucker the same way again. Here is the myth, plain as I can say it. They tell you that pulling the little suckers off your tomato plants gives you more tomatoes, more fruit, a bigger, heavier harvest. That is what the books say. That is what the videos say. That is what the fellow at the garden center says. And it is the exact opposite of the truth. The plain fact is this. The more suckers you pull, the fewer flowers your plant makes. And fewer flowers means fewer tomatoes. Every sucker you pinch off, almost every single time, you are reaching into that plant and taking food right off your own supper table. Now I do not say that to scold anybody. I pulled suckers for years myself, because that is what I was told, same as you. But let me show you why it is wrong, the way the old-timers understood it, by looking at how the good Lord built the plant itself. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Look close at a tomato plant with me. Right up the middle, that strong upright stalk, that is the main stem. That is the backbone of the whole plant. Everything hangs off of it. Now off that main stem come the flower clusters, those little yellow blossoms hanging in bunches. Once a bee or the wind carries the pollen, those blossoms are the very thing that swell up and become your tomatoes. No flower, no fruit. Write that on your heart. It matters more than anything else I am going to tell you today. Now keep working your way up that main stem with me. You will come to a leaf, a big, broad leaf that branches off to the side at near a right angle straight out. And right there, tucked down in the crook where that leaf meets the main stem, in that little armpit, you will find a small new shoot pushing up at an angle. That, friend, is the sucker, that little shoot. That is the thing everybody and their brother tells you to rip out and throw on the compost. And here is what they never tell you. That sucker is not a thief. It is not stealing anything. That sucker is a whole new main stem, just getting its start in the world. Give it a little time and a little sun, and it grows up tall and strong, exactly like the first stalk it came from. It is not a side branch that just sits there. It becomes a second trunk. And what grows along a main stem? You already know. Flower clusters, blossoms, fruit, tomatoes. So let that settle deep. Every single sucker is a future branch, loaded down with its own flowers, its own fruit waiting to happen. When you pinch one off, you are not tidying up the plant. You are cutting off a whole arm of harvest before it ever got the chance to grow one leaf. Let me make it as simple as I can, the way my grandfather would lay it out at the kitchen table with a pencil. One main stem all by itself gives you one line of flower clusters running up it. That is all. Now let one sucker grow out into a stem and you have got two main stems. Two lines of flowers, twice the tomatoes off that one plant. Let two suckers grow up into stems, and now you have got three main stems, 3 lines of flowers, 3 times the harvest. 3 suckers, 4 stems, 4 times the fruit. It builds and it builds and it builds. And here is the beautiful part. The plant wants to do this. It is straining to do this. It is reaching out in every direction trying to make more stems and more flowers and more fruit. We are the ones standing there in the row with our shears, telling it no. Now I can see the question rising up in you already. I can just about hear you saying it out loud. If pruning only takes tomatoes away from me, then why on earth would anybody ever prune a tomato plant at all? Why would the old-timers bother? Why would I? That is exactly the right question to ask, and it is where most folks never get an honest answer. So here it is. Pruning a tomato is not a rule you obey. It is a balance you strike. A trade you make with your eyes open. There are good and proper reasons to do it, and there are foolish reasons, and I am going to give you every one of the good ones in just a minute. But first, you have to know one more thing, because if you get this part wrong, you can ruin a plant clean through before it ever has a fighting chance. Not all tomatoes are the same, not even close. There are 4 different kinds, and how you treat each one is as different as night and day. Get this backwards, and no amount of good pruning will save you. The first kind is the indeterminate tomato. That is your vining tomato. It grows and grows and grows all season long, taller and longer, climbing and reaching like a wild grapevine, never knowing when to quit, right up until the frost finally lays it down. Most of your big heirlooms, most of your good slicing tomatoes and the old Amish paste tomatoes, those are indeterminate. They are vines, plain and simple. The second kind is the semi-determinate, the third is the determinate, and the fourth is the dwarf. Now hear me close on these 3, because this is where gardens get ruined. Those last 3, the semi-determinate, the determinate, and the dwarf, they do not vine on forever. They grow like a bush. They reach a set height that the good Lord built right into their nature, and then they stop. They flower all at once, they set their fruit, and their work is mostly done. So here is the iron rule, and you carve this one in oak. The only tomato you ever pull suckers from is an indeterminate, the vining kind. That is it. On your bush types, your determinates and your dwarfs and your semi-determinates, you never, ever pull a sucker above the first flower cluster. Not once. Not ever. Down low below that first cluster near the dirt, you can strip a few leaves to keep the mud and the disease from splashing up. That is fine. But everything above that first flower cluster you leave be. Because on a bush tomato, those suckers hold near all your fruit. Cut them, and you will trade a full, heavy plant for a near empty one, and stand there in fall wondering where your tomatoes went. All right. Now that we both know we are talking about the vining, indeterminate tomatoes, and only those, let me give you the 3 honest reasons a body might choose to take the shears to one. Because once you understand these 3, you will know exactly what to do in your own patch with your own plants this very season. No more guessing. The first reason to prune is to fit your support. Your trellis, your stakes, your strings, your cattle panel, whatever it is you grow them up. Think on it with me. An indeterminate tomato is a wild thing by nature, left completely to itself, with every sucker becoming a stem, and every one of those stems growing its own suckers. That one single plant turns into a thick, sprawling thicket as tall as a man and wider than your arms can reach. It will swallow a trellis whole. It grows heavier and heavier, until the day a good summer storm rolls through, and the whole top-heavy mess snaps and comes crashing down into the mud, green fruit and all, broken at the stem. So we prune, not to spite the plant, but to keep it to a size that our support can actually carry, clean up off the wet ground where the rot lives. Maybe you let it run 3 or 4 main stems and you keep the rest of the suckers pinched as they come. And mind, 3 is not some magic number. There is nothing holy about 3 stems. It is only that 3 or 4 stems is what a strong trellis or a good set of strings can hold up healthy, all the way through to harvest without breaking down. That is the only reason for the number. Your support sets it, not some rule in a book. That right there is the true reason most of us reach for the shears in the first place. Control. Keeping a wild vine trained to a shape we can tend and tie and reach and hold up off the ground in the good moving air. Nothing more than that. Now stay with me, because the second reason is the one that saves whole gardens. The second reason to prune is spacing and good clean air. This one matters far more than folks give it credit for, and it is exactly where most home gardens fall to sickness, every single year like clockwork. Picture it. Say all you have got is one short row along the back of the garden, a small patch like most of us tend. If you let every tomato in that row grow into a full wild bush, one single plant alone can demand 3 feet of ground all to itself. Now crowd them in close after that, and all those vines grow up into one another until they make one solid, tangled wall of leaves with no gaps at all. And here is the trouble with a wall like that. The air cannot move through it. The morning dew settles down on the leaves and just sits there, hour after hour, and never dries. And a wet still, crowded tomato patch in the heat and damp of summer is the exact cradle where blight and rot and every wilt are born. You could not build a better nursery for disease if you tried. So one way the old-timers handled a small, tight plot was to grow each plant up as a single stem. Just the one. Strip every sucker, keep it lean as a fence rail, and then you can plant them close, near a foot apart, standing up in a tidy row like soldiers. And now look what happens. The air moves clean and free between every plant. The leaves dry off quick in the morning sun. And disease has a far, far harder time taking any hold. And there is a fine bonus to it too. In that same short row where you could only fit 6 or 7 big sprawling bushes, now you can stand up 20 lean, single-stem plants. 20, where you had 7. And that means 20 different kinds, if you please. A whole pantry of different heirlooms in one little row. But hear the trade, because there is always a trade and an honest gardener keeps his eyes on it. Those 20 single-stem plants, all added up together, will give you just about the same basket of tomatoes as your 6 or 7 bushy ones would have. Think on why. 6 bushy plants with 3 stems each is 18 main stems. 20 lean plants with 1 stem each is 20 main stems. Near about the same number of fruiting stems, drawing on near about the same amount of root and soil. So you did not really grow more fruit. What you grew was more variety and cleaner, healthier, better-aired plants. And that is a good and honest trade, a fine one even, so long as you know in your heart that you are making it and you are not fooling yourself that single stemming somehow conjured up more tomatoes out of thin air. It did not. It bought you air and variety, worth having. Just know what you paid. And that brings us to the third and final reason to take the shears to an indeterminate tomato, and this one is only for a particular sort of grower. Size. If your heart is dead set on raising one of those great big beefsteak tomatoes, the kind that fills your whole hand and then some, 2 pounds, 3 pounds, a single slice that covers a piece of bread corner to corner, then you are going to have to prune and prune hard. You strip the suckers and you go further still and pinch off a good share of the flowers themselves. Now why in the world would you pinch off flowers, after everything I just told you? Because a plant only has so much to give, and no more. The roots can only draw so much water and food up out of the soil in a day. Picture it like dividing one pie among all the children at the table. If that plant is trying to feed 100 little tomatoes at once, every one of them gets a thin little sliver, and they all stay small. But pinch the plant back to just a small handful of fruits, and now that whole pie, all that root power pours into those few, and they swell up huge. So if you are chasing a giant prize tomato for the county fair, that is how it is done. But understand exactly what you are doing. You are growing far fewer tomatoes on purpose so that the few you keep can grow large. Now most of us are not after a monster for the fair table. We just want good, honest eating tomatoes. Half a pound, 3/4 of a pound, plenty big for slicing on a sandwich and filling the canning jars come fall. And for that, friend, you do not need to fuss hardly at all. Let your plant carry its 3 or 4 main stems, give it rich soil and good water, and it will hand you beautiful, heavy, half-pound fruit all season long, no special trickery needed. And I will let you in on a little secret about the small ones, your cherry tomatoes. On a cherry tomato, suckering makes no difference to the size at all. None whatsoever. Whether you grow it up as one neat single stem, or you let it run wild with 20 stems, every last cherry comes out the very same sweet little size. So I will be honest with you about my own garden. On my cherry plants, I hardly prune a thing. I let them sprawl and reach and tumble every which way they please, and I just do my level best to tie up what I can so it stays off the ground. One single cherry plant left to grow free like that will give you hundreds upon hundreds of tomatoes, right on through until the first hard frost. Prune that same plant down to one lonely stem, and you would not get 1/4 of them. So with the cherries, I just let the Lord's plant do the thing it was made to do, and I content myself with holding it up. Now there is one more time you might take the shears to a plant, and I want to be careful and honest with you here, because the common advice can lead you wrong and cost you the whole plant. Late in the season, the lower leaves down near the ground often go spotty and yellow with a touch of blight, and the first instinct every time is to rush in and cut all those sick-looking leaves clean off. But listen to me. In a hot, wet, humid summer, the very air itself carries the worst of the wilt diseases, and every single cut you make on that stem is an open wound, a doorway, and that airborne wilt will walk right in through it and kill the whole plant dead in a matter of days. Meanwhile, that slow blight down on the bottom leaves might take weeks, even a month or two, to do its work, and a strong, healthy plant will often just outgrow it up top, faster than it spreads. So in my own garden in the damp heat of high summer, I leave those spotty lower leaves right where they are. A few tired, spotted leaves down at the bottom is the lesser of two evils by a long country mile. Now, if you happen to garden somewhere good and dry, where those wilts do not travel in the air, then you have got more freedom to trim them off. But know your own ground and your own weather before you ever make that cut. So let me gather it all up, plain and simple, the very way we started. Pulling suckers does not give you more tomatoes. It gives you fewer. Every sucker is a future main stem, and every main stem is another whole line of flowers and fruit. So you only ever prune your indeterminate, vining tomatoes, never your bush kinds above that first cluster. And you only prune those vining plants for 3 honest reasons. To keep them trained to a size your trellis can actually hold up. To open clean air through a tight, crowded patch so that disease cannot get its grip. Or to grow a few giant prize fruits on purpose by feeding the few instead of the many. Outside of those 3 reasons, and outside of that careful late-season disease judgment, you put the shears down, and you let the plant do the good work the Lord built it to do. Because every single cut you make that you did not truly need to make is a ripe tomato lifted right off of your own family's table. I hope a little light just went on for you, the way it surely did for me when I first learned all this. It changes everything about how you walk your rows and how you treat that wild, generous, reaching plant. If this was a help to you today, do me the kindness of subscribing here to Yoder's Garden so the next one finds its way to you. And since we just spent so long talking about keeping disease out of a crowded patch, you're going to want to watch my next video on stopping blight and rot the natural way, with no chemicals at all, just the plain, honest methods the old folks trusted and passed down. It pairs right up with everything we covered here today. Thank you kindly for sitting a spell with me. Tend your garden well, save your own seed, and I will see you in the next one.